All right, I got to make sure that the Bluetooth thingy is off here. It is now off. Okay, we're going to pick back up in our book reading by Jeremiah J. Crowley, Romanism, a Menace to the Nation. We are in chapter 8, Papal Despotism. Nothing more startling has ever been put before the public than Rome's recent resolutions of boycott of the Encyclopedia Britannica, Watson's Magazine, the Protestant Magazine, the Menace, etc., and her attitude as censor of the United States mails. At the annual convention of the American Federation of Catholic Societies, held at New Orleans, November 13th through the 16th, 1910, resolutions were passed calling for the passage of federal laws to prevent the transmission by the United States mails of matter offensive to the Roman Catholic Church. In these resolutions, post office employees were bodily called upon to destroy, without any warrant of law, any such mail in transit. The leading ecclesiastic at this convention was Archbishop Falconio, papal delegate to the Roman Catholic Church in America. The Archbishop Falconio had good reason for tendering his sincerest congratulations to the American Federation of Catholic Societies, as its convention held at Columbus, Ohio, August 20th through the 24th, 1911, for its rapid progress and the effective good work accomplished by it. He was fully aware, I presume, of the destruction of much printed matter offensive to the Church in the post offices of the United States of America since their last reunion at New Orleans. I know that several large parcels of printed matter mailed at the General Post Office in Chicago during the months of December 1910 and January and February 1911 never reached their destination. This destruction commenced immediately after their New Orleans convention. On receipt of numerous complaints from subscribers, the sender called on the post office authorities for an explanation, but received no satisfaction whatever. This party's mail continued to be held up, and surmising the cause, the sender threatened public exposure of such unlawful action on the part of the post office department. The threat of exposure scared Rome and her Jesuitical agents, and since then the mail of said party has been unmolested. Rome fears publicity. Meanwhile, to divert attention from their own criminal acts, they are loudly inveighing against the circulation of obscene matter through the mails. And by obscene matter, they mean all matter inimical to the Church of Rome. Non-Catholics think they mean indecent and licentious matter. The inconsistency of the private lives of popes, cardinals, prelates, priests, and monks, as compared with the difference exacted by them in public from Catholics and non-Catholics alike, is, to say the least, ridiculous. For example, decollete gowns and a peekaboo waist are out of order at formal receptions for male members of the hierarchy. Anyone who knows the kind of pictures and indecent realities that most delight the eyes of the Roman Catholic hierarchy will not be faked by any pretended shock that they may profess to experience on contemplation of the nude in art, much less decollete gowns at formal functions. As a satisfactory evidence of this fact, it may be stated that the telephone companies in different cities have threatened to take away the phones from the residences of some priests because their conversation was at times so vile that the female operators refused to receive their messages and threatened to resign if required to do so. The Roman Catholic hierarchy should be indicted for illegally using the mails to operate confidence games chainless letters, etc., in the alleged behalf of the poor homeless children, the poor orphans, and the poor suffering souls in purgatory. No more shameless and outrageous system of fraud was ever perpetuated by men. The American Federation of Catholic Societies, which embraces the numberless associations, societies, clubs, church confraternities, etc., as well as their widespread military organizations, is a menace to our freedom and an injury to the Catholic people whom it pretends to serve. It is a mighty power for the evil in the hands of the Roman Catholic hierarchy. At the Columbus Convention, among other boycotts, a boycott was declared against the Encyclopedia Britannica, which boycott was soon after printed and circulated broadcast throughout the English-speaking world. The following additional proclamation of the same boycott was issued and circulated with the endorsement of the New York County Federation of Catholic Societies, of which Cardinal Farley is the principal under the Pope. No Catholic should purchase the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. No purchasers of it is bound to keep or pay for the work which falls so short of the representation of the editors and publishers. It should be barred from our public libraries, schools, and other institutions. It should be denounced everywhere, in season and out of season, as a shameful attempt to perpetuate ignorance, bigotry, and fanaticism in matters of religion. Mr. Samuel Brine, editor of the Pittsburgh Observer, Roman Catholic, addressing the Catholic editors at the Columbus Convention, said in part, "I have come here for the purpose of very briefly suggesting one thing. It is this, that the Catholic editors of the country concertedly and persistently urge their readers to notify the proprietors and managers of the daily papers that unless they use, instead of the European dispatches of the Associated Press, those furnished by the newly established Catholic International United Telegraph Agency, they will withdraw their patronage from them, either as readers or as advertisers, and will, moreover, boycott both the offending newspapers and those who advertise in them. The boycott is the most powerful weapon and one in constant use by the Roman hierarchy. By intimidation, threats, and terror, they are able to suppress literature and destroy private business, and they do it most effectively. Few and far between are the newspapers who will dare to print anything which would fall under the adverse criticism of a priest. The owners of newspapers, and especially of the great dailies, which circulate in the large cities where there are many Catholics, are notified that there will be a sudden drop in their advertising patronage if they publish or refuse to publish certain matter condemned or approved by the Censor Bureau of the Roman Catholic Church, which has its representatives in numerous and extensive Catholic societies. Non-Catholics, too, who receive from some source or other information that the Roman Catholics are boycotting a particular paper, withdraw their advertisements to gratify and retain Catholic customers. The mere circulation of a city daily does not pay for the paper on which it is printed. The whole revenue is derived from their advertisement. Thus, the press is at the mercy of the secret Roman boycott. But the boycott is by no means confined to the press. It reaches out and extends universally in all directions. Businessmen and professional men of all kinds are at the mercy of the boycott. From some mysterious cause which they cannot comprehend, their patronage falls off, their receipts diminish, and if they do not make terms When informed of the cause of the falling off of business, bankruptcy stares them in the face. In many instances where the Roman Catholic Church possesses the influence, teachers, clerks, agents, and 10,000 individuals of humbler rank are absolutely at their disposal to be discharged from their places and turned out upon the world without means of support. These boycotts are rarely published as such. Sometimes it is true on special occasion when big interests are involved, they do not hesitate to have the boycott printed and circulated. But in vast majority of instances, the Roman boycott gets in its deadly work in the dark. And did anyone ever hear of an injunction being issued against the Roman boycotter, or any one of these said boycotters ever being put in contempt of court? So far, the influence of Rome extend that even the courts themselves, which are supposed to be the citadels of impartiality and justice, are prostituted to serve the interest of the Roman hierarchy. The non-Catholic people should engrave it on their memories and keep it forever fresh in their minds that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Why prosecute and punish non-Catholic clergymen and other citizens while Roman Catholic priests and prelates, foes of the nation, commit similar crimes and worse with impunity? Why waste time and money in sham efforts to curb the trust and at the same time permit and even assist that trust of trust, the Vatican system, to continue the even tenure of its way? And the governments of the United States and of the British Empire had done their duty toward Catholics and non-Catholics alike, whose interests have been injured and sometimes wholly destroyed by Romanism. The majority of priests and prelates who are operating under the protection of the Stars and Stripes and the Union Jack would be behind the bars. Not a few of them would have been rewarded with the hempen tie or electric chair. Furthermore, if the government of the United States had done its plain duty in protecting my rights and interests as an American citizen during the past 10 years, Cardinals Martinelli, Falconio, Archbishop Quigley, Bishop Muldoon, and many other Roman ecclesiastics would now be wearing stripes in penitentiaries as the guests of Uncle Sam, instead of purple and gold in luxury palaces as ambassadors of Christ. One attack upon my life. I will give one illustration of an attempt upon my life. People who are powerful by position and means, but guilty of crimes and about to be exposed, have no conscience to bother them with scruples if they turn to violence to get out of the way the object of their fear. The murder of Dr. Cronin in Chicago a few years ago will illustrate vividly the truthfulness of this statement. During the time which has elapsed since I entered into this crusade for purity, truth, and justice, attempts have been made upon my life. I have frequently told my friends who have expressed concern for my life that nothing better for my cause could happen than my violent taking off, that it would be the supreme emphasis upon my side of this controversy and would be the final circumstance to overwhelmingly convict the unholy priesthood of the Roman Catholic Church. I put my life in the especial keeping of God at the beginning of this struggle. I had made my daily work the subject of daily prayer, and whatever happens to me, I must take as God's way of bringing to pass for that for which I am devoting my time and for which I am willing to lay down my life. The Reverend Thomas F. Cashman of St. Jarlath's Parish, Chicago, found out a plot to kill me, for which murderous work 6 men had been selected. men were ready to take life for pay were constantly on my track. Soon after I was served with Cardinal Martinelli's threat of excommunication, I went on Sunday afternoon, October the 20th, 1901, to see Reverend Thomas P. Hodnett. I visited with him in his parochial residence until about 6 o'clock in the evening, and then left his home to take the Northwestern Elevated Railway car. When I left Father Hodnett's door, I noticed that I was being followed by a man who weighed over 200 pounds, about 5 feet 8 inches in height, a bullet head shape, clean-shaven face, which was very red. He was a typical thug. He was the same man who followed me to Evanston the night before when I went to confer with the Very Reverend Hugh P. Smith. I made a pretense of getting aboard the elevated when it came, stepping on and then off. This man stepped on and then off. I then stepped back again, and he followed me. I stood on the car platform, and this man stood near me. He gave me several jabs in the side with his elbow, trying to provoke retaliation on my part, so he could have an excuse for assaulting me. I suspected at once what the design of the fellow was. I saw that he hoped to embroil me into an encounter, and then he could stab or shoot me and plead self-defense in the event of prosecution for murder or assault to kill. I determined to go the limit of endurance to avoid getting into a struggle with him, as I saw that even if I came out of such an encounter without physical damage, my enemies would have me heralded throughout the country as a common brawler. I made no reply to these rude attacks. As soon as I reached Clark and Lake Streets, I darted from the car and rushed down the steps, my hotel being near. Just then, a westbound Lake Street trolley car came by, and I broadened it to elude him. He followed me. The car was crowded, and we both were on the footboard, he in front and I behind. Suddenly, I jumped off. He followed me. I hurried to my hotel, Sherman House, and he followed me. I stayed in my room about an hour and then went downstairs. In the elevator, I met a gentleman about 55 years of age. He saluted me. He wanted to know my name, and I told him. Said he, "Are you the priest that is after these bad Chicago priests?" I said, "Yes." When he left the elevator, he drew me to one side and said, "Father, I am a Catholic," and he gave me his name and address. "The Catholic people of the country are with you. They know you are right. They want this thing stopped. I have been in the railroad service for 35 years, and the toughest class I meet is the Catholic clergy." I then noticed the thug with 2 other suspicious-looking characters edging toward us, and I said to the gentleman, "You had better be careful. You had better not be seen with me. Those 3 men are bent on dirty business, from what I know of the conduct of one of them within the past 24 hours. He says, "What do you mean, Father?" I replied, "I believe those men are hired to provoke a quarrel with me so that they can have an excuse for taking my life." He put his hand to his hip pocket and said, "I'm from Kentucky. I have a gun. I'll blow their brains out." I said, "For goodness sakes, mister, don't make any move. That is just what they want." Just then, a friend of this gentleman approached. We were introduced, and I then said good afternoon and left the hotel. After walking a few yards, I saw this thug on my trail. I turned back to the hotel, thinking I could enter and leave by some other door, and thus throw him off the scent. I left by another door, but his accomplices evidently told him where I had gone, and he at once appeared, dogging me. I returned to the hotel forthwith and met the 2 gentlemen with whom I had been conversing, and they said, "Father, you had better look out. Your life is in danger." I left the hotel again and walked south on Clark to Washington Street to take a car. I was closely followed by the thug. My 2 friends followed me to see if I would need help. His accomplices went as far as the corner of Clark and Randolph Street. I got into a streetcar and stood on the rear platform. This thug got onto the car and stood close to me and jabbed me in the side with his elbow. When we reached Van Buren Street, I sprang onto a westbound Van Buren Street car. He rushed after me, but missed the car. I would have eluded him if the car had not stopped at the Rock Island Railway station. At this place, he overtook the car and, standing close to me on the rear platform, said, "I came very near losing you." I replied, "Who is paying you for this black guardyism?" He replied, "It's none of your blank business." I said, "I should say it is my business to protect myself from violence." He said, "I am earning my living, and it is none of your business how I earn it." I said, "You remind me of the Irishman who came to this country and put up a cheap hotel in New York City. In the morning, his landlord asked how he liked the place. He replied that the food was good enough, but the sleeping was bad. There was something the matter with his bed. He turned a box of matches to find out, but could not. The landlord told him that the cause of his sleeplessness was bugs. The Irishman had never heard of them. The landlord assured him that he would not mind them after a while, that he would get accustomed to them, that they had to make their living the same as everybody else. The Irishman replied, "I don't object to their making a living, but it is the blank way they make it that I object to." I continued, "This may apply to you." He burst into a loud laugh. He then said, "Father, I won't hurt you, though I expected to have your block off before night. There is something about you, Father, that has convinced me that you are okay, and the Muldoon gangs are stiffs." I said, "What were your instructions?" He said, "To follow you up and get you into a fight and shoot your head off." I said, "If you had done that, would you hang?" He said, "They said that nothing would happen to me, that they would employ the best lawyers. I would get off on a plea of self-defense." Hello, John. I asked, "Who is paying you?" "Well," he said, "the gang that you are after is putting up the stuff." He finally said, "Father, I won't do you any harm. I'm going to throw up this job." I afterwards learned from the two gentlemen whom I had left at the hotel that they followed me when I left the hotel as far as the street corner, and the two accomplices to whom I have referred turned upon them. "What are you doing here? You are interfering in business you have no right to. Get off the sidewalk." A policeman was called, and he took the names of those toughs, who then were allowed to go. Soon after this occurrence, this railroad man attended High Mass at the Holy Name Cathedral, Chicago. As he was entering their church, he saw these identical toughs standing in the vestibule. How fortunate I am that I live in the 20th century and not in the 15th. If this were that dreary time of clerical supremacy, no doubt my body would be burned and its ashes cast into the Chicago River. As Savonarola's body was buried and its ashes thrown into the Arno River. But that river ran to the sea, and it came to pass that his ashes were carried to every shore. And now, wherever liberty is loved, Savonarola has a shrine. Chapter 9. Rome, the mother and mistress of crime. The Roman Catholic Church has been and is the mightiest and most dangerous trust in the world. In fact, she is the mother of trusts and influences many creeds and cults. In them, her Jesuitical agents are high in council. For example, Eugene A. Philbin, ex-district attorney of New York City, papal knight and attorney for Cardinal Farley, is an active director and endowment trustee of the Federation of Protestant Churches and Protestant Christian Organizations in New York City, and as such exercises an influence, to say the least, favorable to Rome. This I know from personal experience. Papal Knight Attorney Philpin, though an active director and endowment trustee of the Federation of Protestant Churches and Christian Organizations in New York City, is at the same time a leading light in the New York County Federation of Roman Catholic Societies and the American Federation of Catholic Societies. Rome could not expediently recognize this quasi-religious federation of Protestant churches and Protestant Christian organizations by publicly placing a prince of the church, John Maria Farley, alias John Murphy Farley, or any other New York Alter Christus, in a position so dangerous to faith and morals as that assigned to heresy and immorality proof Philbin. And again, it would give grave scandal to the faithful if, forsooth, a cardinal, archbishop, bishop, priest, or monk united publicly in a quasi-religious work with heretics, clerical or lay, who are illegitimate by birth and living in concubinage if married by a Protestant minister. Let's see. Did anyone ever hear of the Protestant being a director of endowment trustee of the New York County Federation of Roman Catholic Societies or the American Federation of Catholic Societies? Rome frequently and secretly places some of her ablest Jesuitical agents of either sex in menial positions in non-Catholic homes and offices, both in church and state, in order to find out domestic, church, or state secrets. A few years ago, a prominent Jesuit in disguise took a position as valet in the home of Marquis of Salisbury, Premier of England, and through his Jesuitical cunning, so ingratiated himself with the Premier that he gained access to state papers, thus learning state secrets for his church, which is ever on the alert to plot and plan as it deems expedient. Suspecting that his identity would become known through a lady guest who recognized him as the prominent Jesuit in Rome, who had once obtained for her a private audience with the Pope, he disappeared during the night. Excuse me. Through politics and political appointment of public school boards, superintendents, principals, and teachers, the Roman Catholic Church has a powerful influence in controlling the public schools of the United States and Canada. A ruse well understood by priests and politicians is to use the public press to denounce alleged abuses and incompetencies in the public school system for the purpose of bringing the system into general contempt. A notable instance of this is the systematic use of a large part of the press by prelates, priests, and politicians to undermine the public schools under the false pretext of a kindly regard for their welfare. The public school is the basis and bulwark of our free institutions. An enemy of these schools who would seek to destroy them or even to impair their usefulness is a public enemy, for he strikes at the very foundation of our system of republican government, which supposes intelligence as well as integrity in its citizens. Anarchists are not to be counted in it in comparison with the Roman hierarchy, which is unceasingly working to subvert our public schools. Rome's Jesuitical emissaries, agents, and missionaries are everywhere. They have no conscience but the Pope's dictation. They are allowed to assume whatever dress they please for their better disguise, any occupations in church or state. They are in the highest and lowest conditions and have been known to appear as active and zealous members in non-Catholic associations and churches, sometimes filling prominent Protestant pulpits. They are on the public school boards of education. Some of them are superintendents, principals, and teachers in the public schools. They occupy prominent positions in different societies and organizations, Their object is to engender strife, to influence party spirit, to produce faction, to counsel rebellion, to plot and plan assassinations. For example, Bruno, Savonarola, Burke, Lord Cavendish, Dr. Cronin, Ferrier, Parnell, Ireland's uncrowned king, and others. They avail themselves of every faculty, right or wrong, to gain for the papacy position and power. I need but instant Ireland, where Rome's Jesuitical authority has borne its fruits in rebellion, and the continued degradation of the people. Is England at war with other nations? The Pope's aid may be solicited by them to create distractions in Ireland. There is a sore that is never allowed to heal. It has paralyzed and still paralyzes the power of England. Hence, it has been the arena of political warfare. History shows that the woes of Ireland and the cares of England began when Pope Adrian IV sold Ireland to King Henry II for a penny a household, Peter's pence. And ever since then, Rome has Jesuitically instigated ceaseless strife between Ireland and England, and she has an object in prolonging the agony. The honest and fearless Michael Davitt declared that in Ireland's darkest hour, Rome was her worst enemy. The fact is, Rome is really opposed to home rule or anything else that might benefit the Irish people and establish peace between Ireland and England. She knows that home rule would remove the bone of contention between these countries. I have heard many prominent members of the Roman Catholic hierarchy, both in Ireland and America, declare that the Pope, supported by bishops, priests, and monks, would avail of every opportunity to thwart the ambitions of the Irish people and would fight to the last ditch to prevent home rule for Ireland. We cannot forget how they planned the fall and brought about the sad death of that illustrious leader, Charles Stuart Parnell. Before his death and afterward, prelates, priests, and monks had been secretly enkindling strife, not only between Ireland and England, but between Catholics and non-Catholics, and even between the various factions which make up the Irish party in order to prevent home rule, and thus retain the balance of power in the British Parliament for the Roman Catholic hierarchy, which practically controls the said so-called Irish parliamentary party. The Pope, bishops, priests, and monks know that home rule would kill Rome rule in Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales, and indeed cripple the Vatican's political power in non-Catholic countries, where she, for selfish motives, unites the so-called Irish Catholics into organizations, spiritual and military, such as are to be found in the American Federation of Catholic Societies, which Rome uses as a balance of power in America and Canadian politics. The establishment of an Irish Parliament would necessarily give rise to at least two political parties inside of the Roman Catholic Church, where at present all are united in a solid phalanx against England, thus placing the balance of power in the hands of the heretics, the non-Catholics. Furthermore, a powerful support of the Roman Catholic Church in England would be withdrawn by the retirement of the Irish Parliamentary Party, the present balance of power in the English Parliament. What led Pope Leo XIII to fall in line with Pope Adrian IV and Pope Pius VII in an effort to help England at the expense of Ireland and thus keep up strife between both countries? Why did he issue papal rescripts against the Parnell testimonial and the plan of campaign? Irishmen, let me ask you one question. Why was the Holy See never issued any documents denouncing the terrible persecution of the Irish people. I confidently expect that all honest Catholics, without regard to race, will sympathize with me in my effort to enlighten them on papal intrigue and priestly corruption. Naturally, I turn to the Irish people for their unstinted sympathy and support. I am one of them. Ireland was my cradle, and her sacred soil shelters the dust of my ancestors. I feel that the sad treatment to which Ireland has been subjected by Popes Adrian IV, Pius VII, Leo XIII, and other popes should open the eyes of the Irish people and spur them to combat all forms of ecclesiastical tyranny and corruption. The Irish people alone have it in their power to overthrow the Vatican system and emancipate it, not only for their race, but humanity. Consider the tremendous words of an eminent Roman Catholic representative of a Roman Catholic power, spoken directly to the Honorable Andrew D. White, former ambassador to Germany and the head of the American delegation to the First Peace Congress at The Hague. The following is an extract from Ambassador White's diary. August 5th, 1899. Giving the Catholic representative's statement in opposition to the claim of the Pope in a message to the representative of the Netherlands, and read by him at the close of the Peace Congress, in which the Pope claimed that he was a peacemaker on earth. Quote, this eminent diplomatist from one of the strongest Catholic countries, and himself a Catholic, spoke in substance as follows. The Vatican has always been and is today a storm center. The Pope and his advisors have never hesitated to urge on war, no matter how bloody, when the slightest of their ordinary worldly purposes could be served by it. The great religious wars of Europe were entirely stirred up and egged on by them, and as everybody knows, the Pope did everything to prevent the signing of the Treaty of Munster, which put an end to the dreadful 30 Years' War, even going so far as to declare the oaths taken by the plenipotentiaries at that Congress of no effect. All through the Middle Ages and at the Renaissance period, the popes kept Italy in turmoil and bloodshed for their own family and territorial advantages. And they kept all Europe in turmoil for 2 centuries after the Reformation. In fact, just as long as they could in the wars of religion. They did everything they could to stir up a war between Austria and Prussia in 1866, thinking that Austria, a Catholic power, was sure to win, and then everything possible to stir up the war of France against Prussia in 1870 in order to accomplish the same purpose of checking German Protestantism. And now they are doing all they can to arouse hatred, even to deluge Italy in blood, in the vain attempt to recover the temporal power, though they must know they could not hold it for any length of time, even if they should obtain it. They pretend to be anxious to save souls, especially to love Poland and Ireland, but they have for years used those countries as mere pawns in their game with Russia and Great Britain, and would sell every Catholic soul they contain. Let's see, I said that wrong. And would sell every Catholic soul they contain to the Greek and English churches if they should thereby secure the active aid of those 2 governments against Italy. They have obliged the Italian youth to choose between patriotism and Christianity, and the result is the best of these have become atheists. Their whole policy is based on stirring up hatred and promoting conflicts from which they hope to draw worldly advantage. In view of all this, one stands amazed at the cool statement of the Vatican letter. Pages 350 to 351, Volume 2, Autobiography of Andrew D. White. General Lafayette, reared and educated a Roman Catholic, uttered this prophecy. It is my opinion that if the liberties of this country, the United States of America, are destroyed, it will be by the subtlety of the Roman Catholic Jesuit priests, for they are the most crafty, dangerous enemies to civil and religious liberty. They have instigated most of the wars in Europe. Did not Rome instigate the present conspiracies and insurrections in Mexico and in Portugal? Did she not inspire the Turco-Italian War, and all for furthering her own cause, power, and pelf? Her policies and practices are quite evident to anyone who closely studies her crafty, cunning, Jesuitical methods. In relation to the Mexican Rebellion, the New York Times, through information received from its special correspondents in its issue of May 23, 1911, says, Mexican Catholics plan to rule nation. Formidable party organized to carry election and overturn Diaz's anti-church policy. Mexico City, May 22nd. Catholics working for control. The organization of the Catholic Party, of which General Diaz always said he was afraid, is proceeding, and it is extending its ramifications to the most distant sections of the country. Gabriel Samarella, a wealthy capitalist, is the organizer, a record and nominal leader of the party. Directly behind him, however, are the prelates of the church and the landed aristocracy, insofar they have not gone abroad, and they have an immense following of willing or unwilling peons who are under the influence of the bread giver and the parish priest. Another fact is the Catholic Church in Mexico has a capital of at least $200 million, a larger sum than the capitalization of all the government banks, which escaped confiscation, I can't say that word. It's confiscate. In the days of Benito Juarez, or has since been amassed. This, of course, would give the church party a very strong position, either in business or politics. While the Maderistas, or progressives, as their self-effacing leader would have the party called, are not resting on their laurels, their campaign organization is still rudimentary as compared with that of the Catholics. Many keen observers of this new trend of affairs today express the opinion to me that any election held in the next few months under the broader franchise and the Australian ballot would, if fair, result in the defeat of Madrillo and the justification of the judgment of Diaz, who always excused delay in the extension of the suffrage by saying that he could not hand the country over to the church party which he had fought for so long. Unquote, and then quote again, Catholics working quietly. An element in the campaign which the newspapers have already begun to discuss openly, working more quietly, but not a whit less ambitiously than any claimant for the throne of Diaz, is the Catholic Church. The only step in the open that it has been necessary to take has been accomplished in the formation of the Catholic Party and the publication of a platform providing for the closer union of church and state. Mexico offers a great field for such a party. The New York Herald says those who glibly talk of intervention in Mexico are requested to stop long enough to consider that the intervention would mean war with Mexico, unification of all Mexicans against the United States, employment of an American army of 200,000 men, mostly volunteers, to invade Mexico, long and arduous campaigns in tropical climate, suspension of $150 million of annual trade, jeopardizing lives and investments of Americans now in Mexico, incalculable expenditure of life and treasure, antagonizing of Mexico's sister Latin American states. All of this Rome has planned and hopes to accomplish in order to serve her worldly purposes. Her political success on this continent depends largely on the international complications which she is ceasingly striving to bring about, notwithstanding the Pope's claim as a peacemaker on earth. It may be important to state here the Archbishop Ireland of St. Paul, Minnesota, arrived at his political headquarters, which are located 1 block from the White House, on the very day that President Taft summarily ordered the United States troops to the Mexican border. As usual, he called on the president. The White House is one of the sites which priests, prelates, and the princes of the church never want to miss. President Taft's Mexican war map, which is brought up to date every day, has a great attraction for them at present. Relative to the recent troubles in Portugal, the New York Herald says, bishops to fight Lisbon cabinet. Episcopate expected to advocate opposition to government on account of separation law. Lisbon Wednesday. The bishops of Portugal will hold a meeting next week to protest against the law of separation of church and state. It is reported that they will refuse to recognize the government's authority in ecclesiastical matters and instruct the lesser clergy of the provinces to decline to accept the stipends offered to them and make propaganda against the government at the forthcoming elections. The New York Times, in its issue of December 23rd, 1911, says, to prosecute prelate, Portugal will charge Lisbon Patriarch with conspiracy against Republic. Lisbon, December 22nd. The government has decided to prosecute Monsignor Anthony Mendez Bello, Patriarch of Lisbon, on a charge of conspiracy against the Republic. It is considered certain that the prelate will be sentenced to the maximum of 6 years imprisonment and 10 years deportation to Africa. The Public Press of January 5th, 1912 says, as a sequel to the punishment of the Patriarch of Lisbon, Monsignor Anthony Mendez Bello, who was ordered into exile for 2 years by the Portuguese government on December 28th, all the Portuguese bishops today proclaimed their independence from the government. The Minister of Justice, in reply to a communication from them notifying him of their decision, declared that if they persisted in their refusal to recognize the civil authority, they would all be expelled from Portugal. At the same time, he will hold them responsible for any disturbances. If the governments of non-Catholic countries would only administer such medicine to priests, prelates, and princes of the church, their political and supposed religious power would rapidly disappear and the liberties of the people would be secured. Relative to the present war between Italy and Turkey, the New York Times, in its issue of September 29, 1911, says, Pope favors the step, but hopes that bloodshed will be avoided. Pope favors Italy's plans. The Pope is showing great interest in the preparations for the expedition and has ordered a propaganda for the purpose of instructing the missionaries to use their influence in favor of the Italian plans, considering these plans as offering advantages for the spread of Catholicism in North Africa. But he hopes that success will be attained by Italy without the shedding of blood. Since the beginning of the Turco-Italian War, bloodshed and butchery, even of women and children, have been of frequent occurrence. And notwithstanding the hypocritical hope expressed by the Pope, is no doubt a source of great joy to that storm center, the Vatican, which is now eagerly awaiting similar slaughter between Americans and Mexicans. Popes and their Jesuitical agents have been and are the instigators of war. And while the world is having real pain, Rome is having champagne. For ways that are dark, the heathen Chinese is not in it with the Roman clergy. And that right there ends those 2 chapters. That's pretty crazy. All right, until next time, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And let us embed the Word of God upon the tablets of our hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. I love you all. Bye-bye.